All right, DJ LeRoy,
Night
aka
Watchman.
Kurt.
That is me. That is me. And you know what? I'm here to report. Remember, I am a recipient of the vaccine, and I'm
All
feeling
right,
good today, man.
I'm
Good.
proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so last I checked, just barely, we're still a democracy.
That is correct.
And next year, this time, New York City is going to be under new management. And so
Woohoo!
we
Okay.
get a chance to exercise this process by becoming involved and talking to people who are looking to be part of that new management. So our show today is great. First part of our show, we have Maya Wiley, who could be the first female mayor of New York City.
Yes.
And the second part of the show, we'll have Alvin Bragg, running for Manhattan District Attorney, Harlem's own. But first, without further ado, Maya Wiley, welcome to Soul Lounge Primetime. How are you?
Welcome.
Oh, it's
Well,
such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited
absolutely.
to have you.
Yep.
So, we want to jump in and just kind of start to ask. Obviously, you're going for one of the most difficult and complex jobs in the country.
Yes.
Um, and we know you didn't just wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I want to do this." You obviously had some thoughts and a vision of how you want to see this city. So I wanted to just kind of jump in there and find out first of all what's the Maya Wiley vision for what New York is about.
Oh, thanks, Bob. And Curtis, good to see you too.
You
And
too.
look, I mean, for me, I have been black all my life. Let me be very clear. And we know, and what has so often been the case, I went to law school, came to Columbia, lived in Harlem, my
Hmm.
entire Columbia career, Esplanade Gardens last year and a half of
Oh
my
my
Hmm.
God. Okay. She's authentic. Yes. All right.
yeah, back in the day,
Hmm.
just the Kentucky Fried Chicken across the street. But hey,
Oh.
but but I say that to say, I went to law school in order to be a civil rights lawyer, in order to do what we have all been doing across the generations, which is fighting for the investments and the
Hmm.
opportunities that we deserve. And so for me, a big part of this vision is recognizing that we have had twin pandemics. We have the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic that we call structural racism, and we have the pandemic that we call COVID. And all the COVID did is laid bare, pulled the curtains back, just like when we saw uh, George Floyd killed.
Mm.
These things just pull the curtain back on the things our communities have been experiencing and have known for a long time, are not new and are
Mm-hmm.
not secrets, but never get quite the attention that they need or deserve. So, a big part of my vision is that this is a city that
Yes.
recognizes our value and our worth and how much our communities contribute to what we love about New York, and that we finally have a city government that really puts our communities first and understands that dignity is what we all deserve. And dignity means development without displacement. Dignity means a school system that sees every last one of our kids as excellent. Dignity means that we are safe from crime, but we're also safe from police violence. And that
Mm.
all these things are possible, but they're only possible when we have a leadership that does things differently and that recognizes that it's partnering with our communities, with our community experts, like my dear friend Clayton, who I know is going to be on the show later. And we have so much expertise, so much innovation, so much knowledge, so much know-how. And it's finally time that show up and be front and center for city government.
Excellent. Yes. Oh, well, you know what? You have been my friend in my head, especially under the administration of 45. I think I might have a stake in MSNBC. That's what I'll just say.
We
But
should
but
all have
you
stock because
yes.
black folks run that station.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so always hearing your take on things and really, really go full circle to let us know that it's more about just his administration. It's about the systemic issues that we've been dealing with. So I'm not going to take take up any questions because I know some of them will be coming fast and furious. So, Night Watchman, you want to bring those other folks in here?
Absolutely. So,
Okay.
first, I want to introduce Carol Johnson. She's the incident commander of Harlem Emergency Network, which is a local community organization that's been involved with both New York City Emergency Management, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And Carol is personally responsible for distributing tens of thousands of PPE masks during the height of the pandemic. So,
Yep.
Carol, welcome to Soul Lounge Prime Time.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be in the midst of such royalty. Thank you, Miss Wiley, for joining
Oh, I
us.
thought you were talking about me and Curtis. I'm sorry.
No, I have to get my sister out. Thank you so much for being here.
And I also want to introduce James Archer, who is a regular commentator for political issues on our show. And we bring him in to make sure that we have a point of view that is younger and less gray than ours.
Oh, well, 32, you know, I don't know how much longer you can say that.
That's true. That's true. So, Night Watchman, has Clayton joined us yet or no?
No, not yet.
Okay, then let's get it popping, as they say. Carol, would you like to fire off to Maya with a question?
Yes, so I have a question regarding school kids. Since many public school kids will be at a disadvantage by the end of the year because of the past year's circumstances and how they were managed, how can we make schools more equitable for all? How can we aim to fix the gap that widened this year to an already problematic school system? Would you consider lifting zones for schooling and have more parents be given the actual choice of where to send their children to school?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Johnson. And more importantly, thank you for all your work, because I know how much effort it probably took for you to get all of that PPE delivered, access to, and I know how important it was for our communities. So look, this is a question that has been extremely important. You know, I'm a mom. I have two kids, one in college now, one finishing high school. And I know that all our kids have lost at least a year. And one of the things that that means is, first and foremost, we have to focus on the innovations that we know exist that help kids not just catch up, but also recognize that even when kids are behind, they can do accelerated learning. I've actually been talking about P-TECH, which is, you know, a high school program, exists throughout the country, but also here in Brooklyn, where kids who are behind grade level when they start high school in a technology focused curriculum, where they're actually getting to do 2 years of college level work. And it's a 6-year program so that they're graduating also with an associate's degree. And it's a fabulous program, and it includes internships and workplace experience and all kinds of things that get them not just a diploma, but employed. And so these are things we have to think about how we invest in. It does require more resources into our schools, and particularly our schools that were overcrowded, where kids didn't have internet access, where our teachers were not supported to be able to deliver online learning. And it has to recognize that our social and emotional supports are going to be critical to helping our kids come back, because we know they're traumatized. And they're traumatized both by COVID and the experiences that they've had as a result of that. And they're traumatized by gun violence. And we should be really upfront and clear about that. And we know from the research that when violence happens in communities, it does impact academic performance of students. So one of the things that we've said is we're going to make sure there are counselors in the schools, and that there's trauma-informed care, and that we're creating student support teams, so that we're thinking about the whole child. And the community school model, I mean, remember that we have some success with recognizing that when we have partnerships with community-based organizations and service providers with schools and coordination with the school, so that kids and families are getting wraparound supports. Because you can't do well in school if you can't eat. You can't do well in school if you're about to be evicted. You can't do well in school if you're traumatized and not getting the mental health services you need. And that so much of what the community school model does is build in those supports and partnerships so that we're treating kids as whole kids and treating the whole family as part of the educational experience. So we will focus on that right up front and right away when I am mayor. And to your other points, Ms. Johnson, I just want to say I co-chaired the School Diversity Advisory Group for the city, along with Hazel Dukes and Jose Calderon. It was an extremely important process. I stand by those recommendations. We have been ignoring the state process on rezoning, and we talked about that in the report, and that we should comply with state law and go through a zoning process. But to your point, we also made a whole bunch of recommendations about how we start innovating in ways that create more options and more exciting options and more investments in our communities where we have not had educational excellence, but our kids are still excellent and they deserve those investments.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. James.
So my question was actually going to be about policing, but Carol kind of inspired me. And this is something that is very close to my heart. It's about schooling. I was lucky enough to go to Hunter College Elementary and Hunter College High School, which, pretty much all that guaranteed that I would go to a good college afterwards. My dad he went to Stuyvesant and is also lucky one of these specialized public schools, which, is really like a lifeline for those who can't afford these like unbelievably expensive private schools. I'm sure you're very much aware of the debate on how the test is discriminatory, and it's led. I think the most recent Stuyvesant class had 6 black students, but you're getting a lot of pushback from communities who are benefiting from the test. What is your opinion on the specialized high school test, and what would you do if you were to remove it? What would you replace it with?
Thank you for that question, because once again, we spent a lot of time looking at high school and all school, not just high school, admissions processes across the board, K through 12. Because as we know, we had families paying up to $2,000 to prepare 4-year-olds for gifted and talented high stakes tests. I mean, things that made no sense. And what we've primarily been doing is we've been testing for resources, not for excellence, right? Because it has become about whether you have the resources to prepare. My own daughter, you talk about Hunter College High School. She, in her public school, was identified as someone who was you remember, they just take the top 10%, I guess, of school performance based on tests, and then they invite you to sit. And I was like, okay, great, she'll go sit for that test. And then other parents told us we were crazy, asked us how long we had been tutoring for the test. And I was like, what are you talking about? We were just sending her to school. And they were like, oh, my kid's been tutoring for that test for 2 years. That is not about assessing, what kids can do. That is about testing for resources. And we have to stop that. So just as you said, the specialized high school test is not a deeply valid test. And what we're primarily doing is sorting. I would get rid of it. We also have to recognize that the vast majority of our high schools don't use it, right? And a big part of what we have to do is ensure that there are a lot of excellent options for our kids. It shouldn't be that unless you go to Stuyvesant or Bronx Silence or Brooklyn Tech, you're not going to get an excellent education. It's not even true. We have some really good high schools that don't use any of that. But if we're going to assess, we have to actually create an assessment that really assesses where kids are, not tests for resources and for wealth. And one of the things we proposed in the School Diversity Advisory Group is that there's literally set up a commission, because there's lots of research being done in academia about better assessment tools that assess, not test for resources. And so that's what I would do, and make sure that we had a much more robust way of ensuring that both admissions, but also making sure we have other options, because it's just simply not the case. This was my point about P-Tech. It's actually a great high school. Doesn't screen at all.
Wow.
You can be behind grade level. We have to stop thinking about, accelerated learning only as something for certain kids, because every single child can do some level of accelerated learning on something. And that's a different approach, and it's a different way of seeing our kids.
Absolutely.
Now, James was going to ask a question on policing, and I wanted to go down that road. And I want to start by showing you this picture here. This is a robot that is now on the streets of the Bronx, and this scares me. And I see it as a symbol of
RoboCop. Okay.
And we know that there's been, countrywide, there's been kind of an over militarization of police, and there was a whole in 2020, the whole defund the police push, which was not about eliminating police forces,
Correct.
obviously, but it was about reallocation of resources away from this over militarization and more into things such as training and conflict resolution. So we wanted to hear, and you served on the Civilian Complaints Review Board. So this is an area that you're obviously very, very familiar with. So we want to hear your thoughts on your vision for policing in New York.
Oh, thank you for this question, because it's also, as a racial justice advocate and as someone who helped set up a criminal justice initiative in post-apartheid South Africa, this has been something I've been focused on for a long time. So let's start with, we have to recognize how we create public safety. And that means we put the public back in public safety. What do I mean by that? Number one, I mean, we understand and talk about what the role of policing is. That little robot dog that looked scary, and I'm wondering if it was armed, is a containment and a control model of policing rather than a problem solving model, right?
Wow.
If we're actually focusing on solving problems, we do a couple of different things. We focus police on what is an appropriate police response. Illegal guns coming into this city and into our communities, for example, is an appropriate police response. There's a role and a job for police officers in that. But one of the things that we've done in looking at gun violence in particular is said, well, look, both from the research, and I am a wonk, I admit it, I've been an academic, but I've also been on the front lines of these as a policy person and in city government, is when we make it easier to get a job than a gun violence comes down. When we recognize that trauma and mental health issues are actually a part of the problem, we start treating the illness, not waiting for the crime. And that means what we do is say, it's not the job of police officers to be mental health professionals. That's not the policing role. So rather than having a crisis response 911 call go to the police department, it should go to the experts, because a lot of times, most times, vast majority, it's not a badge and a gun that you need, it's an expert. And so what we have not done is created the crisis response units that are responding to mental health crises, like an Eleanor Bumpers, right? Like someone who simply needs help. And so that is a big part of it. What we're doing in our gun violence prevention platform, and it was the first I put out because our communities were telling us, we don't feel like this issue of increasing gun violence is getting sufficient attention from leaders. It hasn't been treated with the urgency it should. So we made the decision that we were going to be urgent about it. And we thought we were going to put out a housing platform first. We put out gun violence prevention first. And we said a couple of different things, like trauma-informed care in our schools, like we're going to double the number of summer youth jobs in communities that have high rates of violence, period. Double them. We'll do more if we can, but at minimum, we'll start by doubling them, earmarked and targeted for communities that need it. But really importantly, we are going to take $18 million from the New York City Police Department budget, and we are going to put it into creating a participatory justice fund, which means communities that have high rates of violent crime, gun violence, will be able to say what public dollars should pay for that makes them more safe. Because what we've been hearing from communities is we need after school programs, we need a youth center, we need more crisis intervention and peer mediators like the Cure Violence model, where we have folks go in and interrupt it before it jumps off. That puts the power in the hands of communities, because we know we are the experts in community on what is happening in our communities, not government. So government needs to partner and say, we're going to put the power in your hands. We're going to recognize that you're experts on your own community, and we're going to partner with you by helping you direct the dollars to where you need it. And the other thing I'll say is we're going to do safe street corridors for kids going to school and coming from school by partnering with community-based organizations. When you think of a Carol Johnson, and I think of the incredible amount of what we have community-based leadership doing so much with so little, we're going to change that. And we're going to actually invest in that. And we're actually going to have communities be empowered to be the solutions. And so that's a big part of how we'll approach policing, because that's a different model of public safety.
So certainly, Amaya, we know that this pushback will be coming, and we're talking about the police union. What are you prepared to do?
Got my hair pulled back. The earrings came off. I haven't yet put the Vaseline on the face.
Okay. All right.
I mean, look, I will not be the mayor elected by the police department. I will be the mayor elected by the people. So I will only be one humble servant. And I'll be the humble servant to the people. So that is my only guidepost. I believe in collective bargaining. I believe that workers have the right, including police officers, to come together and ask to have fair and safe labor conditions. I believe in that. But when you come to an elected official and say, leave us alone when we violate people's rights, leave us alone when we kill somebody, leave us alone when we take a baton to someone's head just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. No, that's it. That's not your job. That's not your role. That's not your function. And that is not something I will shy away from in terms of a fight. But if you want to talk about fair and good working conditions for police officers, absolutely. Open for business when it comes to fairness, when it comes to justice. But that's for everyone.
Gotcha.
So let's talk about jobs and the economy, because you're going in hot. Obviously, coming out of the pandemic. And pandemic economy. So New York lost a lot in terms of travel and tourism, and then we saw the divide and privilege, where a lot of wealthy New Yorkers just decided to leave, and to them I say good riddance and don't come back. But for those of us who are staying, what is your vision for creating jobs and business opportunities that is the lifeblood of this city?
Yeah, and this is front and center, and I've already put out 2 proposals. I would tell you that my first New Deal New York will create 100,000 new jobs, and it will be done by spending $10 billion in capital construction. That's a part of our budget, not the expense budget. That is our capital construction budget. And I, as mayor, have authority over it. I don't have to ask for permission from Albany or dollars from DC to get this done. But what it does is it builds things we need and fixes things we need fixed. And we put people to work doing it, just like in the New Deal and what helped pull us out of the Great Depression. This matters because we're also going to focus the projects, the things we build and the things we fix in communities hard hit by COVID. right? Because they're also the communities with the highest levels of unemployment and who had the pandemic of structural racism before COVID hit. So it's also going to be about investing in things like affordable housing, investing in things like community centers, investing in NYCHA. I've got $2 billion of that $10 billion right up front saying we're going to do renovation and rehabilitation because they have to be safe and dignified living conditions for our residents. But all of that will also include women and minority-owned business contracting opportunities. It will include opportunities to get our artists back to work and doing some of the design and decorating for some of the projects. But as I said, 100,000 jobs, and we will do local targeting for hiring for those jobs. The other thing is the caring economy. You know, look, Black women in particular, women of color in general, have been the hardest hit by the job losses. If you just take Black women who are immigrants, 62% of job losses for Black immigrant women in this city. That is insane. And we have to recognize how much the caring economy, you know, home health aides, you know, folks who show up and take care of our people, folks who take care of our kids, our elderly, our disabled. It's a huge part of our workforce for our communities, but it's also a tremendous need for our communities and one of the top 3 costs that make the city hard to afford for too many of our people. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take money again. I'm going to reduce the size of the entering classes into the New York City Police Department to pay for this. I'm also going to take savings from closing Rikers and savings that we derive there from stopping putting people in prison for poverty. And we're also going to take money because there's literally what's called child care block grant funds the city isn't spending right now. So we'll take that money. We're going to create community care centers, which will be high quality drop-off centers. When you have an emergency and you need child care or elder care or care for a family member with a disability, we'll also co-locate there other community-based organizations and services, government services, where you don't have to leave your community to get what you need. But we'll also put $5,000 into the pockets as care grants into starting with the 100,000 neediest families. And that will include folks who are undocumented because they have not gotten relief in the context of this pandemic, and they deserve it. A lot of them are essential workers. And that is critical to helping people both pay the rent, help people buy food. So while we're creating jobs, because the care centers also are job creators, we're also helping folks solve some of their affordability problems, some of the things that are creating a struggle for them. And that's just our starting point, but that's what we've put out already.
All right. Well,
So
we have one
yeah,
more question. The golden ticket. Who would like to do that? Oh, I see, Mr. Archer.
Well, I wanted to ask the question that Clayton didn't get here to ask, which is I would assume he would ask about technology. And I think the biggest issue we've seen lately is the digital divide in education. And, you know, our school system failed when it came to delivering remote learning for our neighborhoods. And so how would you address that?
Well, let me just say, first of all, as a civil rights lawyer and racial justice advocate, digital divide issues are issues I have worked on for a long time. And when I went into City Hall, I'm the only candidate that has served in the hot kitchen we call City Hall. And when I was there, one of the things that I had was universal broadband. Clayton is a treasure. Clayton is someone we partnered with. But let me just say this. What I did is create the plan, found the money, and got every single apartment in Queensbridge houses public broadband in the home, not just out on the street. So that when I left, I had laid out a plan for public housing developments in every single borough to do the same. The mayor stood up and made an announcement about it. I got $70 million in the capital construction budget. When I left, it didn't happen. This is about leadership. This is about vision. This is about the ability to have good, smart people who know how to get it done. And what we could have and should have done, one, was have already been building out that model in the developments that were announced in 2016, we made that announcement. Because we would have had more places that had in-home broadband without regard to whether they could pay for it. But the other thing we would have done is homeless shelters, they would have been wired. They would have been wired fast, quick, and in a hurry. We would have had resources. We would have used the summer to make sure that we were training our teachers and supporting our principals in how to deliver online learning and in identifying every single child that needed access. And that would have been done before the fall came around and we saw the incredible disaster that online learning, because we should have learned from what we saw in the spring and what we already knew. In January, the city had put out a report, a broadband plan, identifying that 1.8 million New Yorkers either didn't have broadband at home or didn't have a device of some kind. So we should have been on top of it. It's solvable. It also requires partnerships with folks like Silicon Harlem, with our libraries. We have both Brooklyn Public Library and New York Public Library looking at how they can deliver the broadband signal they pay for out to the community, and city government has to be a partner in that. So there's so many different ways we could do that. And I'm the only candidate running in this race that's actually done it.
All right.
For sure.
So Maya, we thank you for coming to join us. We're going to leave you an open invitation to come back before the primary, which I believe is on June 22nd.
Yes.
And you're running against 9 other very qualified candidates. We appreciate,
including another billionaire. Bob, well, what do you know?
Wait, Bob, they're running against me.
They're running against you. Absolutely. Oh, and you have they're putting up a name brand Republican candidate this year, Curtis Lewa. So I mean, but don't laugh, because that's how we laughed at Donald Trump. So you know, we look at the landscape, but we appreciate hearing what your vision for the city is, and we look forward to having you back sometime again before the primary.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Wiley.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate you, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Archer. Thank you so much, and I'll be back.
All right.
So this has been So Loud Prime Time on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
So you know what, NightWatchman, that was a good interview, but you know, our next guest, he's one of Harlem's very own. He's a brother who I actually had a nice little breakfast meeting with him over at Il Cafe Latte. This is the first time I met the brother, but we had been moving in a lot of the same circles there. His brother also, and I didn't even know that he also does Sunday school over at Abyssinia. So he's a real down brother. But more importantly, you know what? He is running for, and if he wins, he will be the first African American to be DA, district attorney for the island of Manhattan. You know what? Let's bring him out. Mr. Alvin Bragg. You know it.
Welcome, Alvin.
Good to see y'all. Hope
you too, my brother. Absolutely, man. So Alvin, let's back up, because I remember when we met, you were telling me about your whole experience in terms of growing up in Harlem. Tell us what that was like, man.
Definitely. And I remember when we met, as you said, kind of traveling in the same circles. I love the village of Harlem, right?
Yes.
You know, we sat there and broke bread, and by the time it was over, we said we're basically family. We know all the same folks. And yeah, I guess that happens. You know, I've been here for I'm 47, so I've been here my entire life, and I love it. You know, being mentor. You talk about being an Abyssinian. I was a Sunday school student at Abyssinian, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
You know, sort of a continuity there. Or we were talking before we came on air about Harlem Little League, where I'm a coach now, and I grew up playing youth sports in Harlem. So love it. I mean, there were some challenging experiences, which are why I'm running for district attorney. Growing up, you know, my first interaction with police, corner of 139th and Adam Clayton Powell, gunpoint stop, illegal search, claimed I was a drug dealer falsely.
Wow.
And that happened a lot. I mean, I know you remember the 80s.
Yeah.
And still these things are going on. But when I was growing up, stopped all the time, 3 times at gunpoint, And we also had public safety challenges, right? I had 3 times where people who weren't police point guns at me. And so those early experiences, that's why I went to law school. And I said, there's got to be a better way to protect our civil rights and to have true, real, actual, public safety. Because these officers who were stopping me, I didn't feel safe, right? I felt far less safe. So I said, there's got to be a better way to have public safety and fairness. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, fighting for that.
That's great. That's great. So you're going for what has to be a difficult job. I don't know if it's a good thing that here in 2021 you're vying to be the first Black district attorney, but it's certainly timely. So what are the biggest challenges you see walking into this position?
So, and I when you say the first, I'm always, mindful, we have our vice president now, says, I believe she says her mother told her, right, hey, make sure there's a second. So, and I see in many ways, while this is the first in Manhattan, Ken Thompson in Brooklyn was a dear friend. And I think when we talk about what prosecutors are doing now, and there's a movement afoot in the country, I think he doesn't get the credit that he should for really starting these things off. You think about what he did with conviction integrity and looking back at convictions that weren't warranted and voiding them and exonerating people. So, look, I think there are a lot of challenges. We obviously in the middle of a conversation that, in my view, is long overdue. I remember Rodney King. That was the first probably experience of the national scale for me. And we know that lots of people are now focused on that who were not. Many of us have lived it for years. So we have police accountability issues that need to be focused on. And then we also know that, this past summer, even though we're still at historically low crime rates, if you're the parent of the 1-year-old who was shot in the stroller, that data is not of comfort to you. So it's talking about both those in the same breath. Our communities have both police accountability issues and public safety. And then we have this great network of community leaders and community resources that really are kind of interconnectivity and our vibrancy. And so it's leaning on those groups and letting them lead and be a part of. Right now, we got the DA's office all the way downtown, and folks see the DA when something gets prosecuted. We need the DA in all of our communities thinking about prevention and public health and public safety and making our everyday lives better.
Absolutely. So you know what? I was also thinking that your background, you coming from the Attorney General's office, what was that experience like? And give an overview in terms of the Attorney General, in terms of things that they are responsible for, the type of crimes that they have to prosecute.
No, I appreciate it, and so I've touched all of our levels. I was at the City Council and I led their litigation. Then I was a federal prosecutor in Manhattan, focusing a lot on public corruption, but on other issues. And then was at the Attorney General's office in a few roles. The last one, chief deputy, overseeing the entire office of more than 1,200. And the Attorney General has interesting jurisdictions. So we did things like focus on civil rights, where we pushed back on stop and frisk and got a lot of data and published a report showing only 0.1% of those stops resulted in a conviction for a gun offense, which of course was kind of the whole thesis that Giuliani had. So we have that jurisdiction, but we also had healthcare. We spent a lot of our time, suing the Trump administration for the last couple of years, pushing back. He was trying to roll back the Affordable Care Act and access to healthcare. So we litigated against him on a whole host of issues, and then also criminal jurisdiction, where we look at sort of crimes that span more than one county, right? So that go beyond any one DA's office. We did work on guns. We focused on the source of guns, where they come from. Many of them coming from down south, up what we call the Iron Pipeline. And my theory of prosecution is you follow the money and you follow the contraband, and they take you to the person who's most culpable. And if we stop that, then we can really do something. So looking at that and coming up with a program based on data to stop the flow of guns. We don't make these guns in Manhattan, and there are people sitting way far away from Manhattan profiting off our pain. So that's the kind of things we're able to do, sort of macro, bigger picture stuff, not the sort of everyday things that we think about through the district attorney's office. We didn't do things at the AG's office. Like the DA's, this summer prosecuted a homeless person for taking up 2 seats on the subway. I mean, that to me is a waste of time. If I DA, I'm not doing that. Our docket at the Attorney General's office was broader, When everything from suing Trump for his misconduct to the Trump Foundation, suing Harvey Weinstein for having a hostile work environment, to working on these kind of gun trafficking matters I talked about.
Gotcha. One of the things that I certainly do know, you mentioned, what was this? In terms of Trump, we certainly do know that he's been exonerated. Well, he didn't get impeached. How would you do things differently in terms of when now private citizen Trump? Will you continue to go after him here in Manhattan?
So, I was actually watching last night, one of the lead architects of the legal strategy talk about the impeachment and then how the Republicans didn't convict. This is, he's everywhere with the misconduct. He's in Georgia, calling, trying to, find me some votes, right? He's stoking up an insurrection in DC in the Capitol. My old office in Manhattan, the Southern District of New York, already has an indictment, right, where they indicted his lawyer, and he's the unindicted co-conspirator for campaign finance fraud, the hush payments. And then we know Attorney General James and the Manhattan DA's office have investigations about him misvaluing assets. That's the focus of their investigation. So, look, I can't comment on a matter that I might inherit, but I can tell you this. I have followed the facts wherever they've gone throughout my career. So if that means the Trump Foundation case, or if it meant suing his administration more than 100 times we sued him for travel ban and DACA, family separation at the border. And then more broadly, we need a system that focuses on those in power and holds them accountable. So, I prosecuted the former majority leader of the state Senate for bribery. I prosecuted a mayor for campaign finance fraud. I prosecuted another mayor for bribery. So, I have a 20-year plus history of holding people in power accountable. I'm going to go where the facts take me. Donald Trump's going to be no exception to what I've done for the last 20 years.
The relationship that you have, or the DA's office traditionally has had with police, how can there be true independent accountability for police misconduct? How will you run it, the office?
Yeah. This is a key issue. This is why I went to law school in many ways, particularly as my kids approach the age when I was first stopped. I'm still that 15-year-old kid on the corner of Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard with a gun in my face. So we need true independence. And this has been a focus throughout my career. My first, case as a young lawyer was suing the state police for excessive force. When I was a federal prosecutor, I tried an FBI agent for lying and got a conviction at trial. Right now I'm representing Eric Garner's mother, Gwen Carr, in a case against the NYPD and the mayor, still trying to get transparency and details 6+ years later. So I'm going to set up an independent unit that's going to report directly to me, given my expertise. They're not going to work at all with the NYPD and other cases, right? They need to be siloed. I'm thinking about having them in a location actually outside of the main DA's office, just so they will be compartmentalized, right? We got to be careful about who you hire into this sort of unit. I built a unit like this at the Attorney General's office. My first hire was someone who had significant experience doing homicide cases, but he also had a master's in social work, right? So we need people who want to do this work, who understand independence, will report, directly to senior staff and me. And then the big thing is transparency. We saw this, in the Breonna Taylor matter. We see this time and time again. Prosecutors stand up and say, hey, grand jury secrecy, we can't tell you anything. At the AG's office, based upon our conversation with, community organizations, families that lost loved ones, they said transparency is key. So when we didn't bring a charge, we issued a full report, everything we found on all of our legal conclusions, and importantly, recommendations to stop it before it happens, so that we want to stop these deaths in the first place. So that's how I'm going to handle it as DA. And one last note on independence. So anyone who's out there questioning, saying, oh, well, do we really need it? One of the cases we did was upstate, a county outside of Albany. We prosecuted a sitting district attorney, because he, in our view, we allege, basically through a case, he was investigating a police officer who he worked with, who shot and killed an unarmed black motorist. He said, nothing to see here. We ended up investigating him, prosecuting him. He had opted for a bench trial of someone up there by him, and he got acquitted. But, he was no longer in office. And anyone who says to me, oh, we really need, any changes in this area, I point to that case, much of which now his conduct that we allege is public. We need true independence, people with resolve, who will be independent and accountable to the voters, not the NYPD.
Wow.
So Alvin, you brought up earlier Kenneth Thompson, who I agree with you did not get as much credit as he deserved for setting a trend for fair prosecutions, and in particular, he took a stance against these marijuana arrests, which were part of the whole stop and frisk thing, and then the reason for creating escalation, and it resulted in this whole marijuana inequity where so many young Black men and women were arrested for a crime that other people, routinely commit. And as we go into an era where we're looking at legalization, the governor has finally kind of signed on it, and it seems like the legislator and the governor are still negotiating on points, but it seems likely that we're going to have legalization of adult use here. But my understanding is that we've still been having these low-level marijuana arrests in our communities. So what's your stance on that, and how would you approach that particular issue?
Yeah, Kim was a real leader in this space, and y'all remember that he caught a lot of pushback. Doing this takes a lot of resolve.
Yeah.
Look, and I think I'm preaching to the choir on this one. Marijuana has been legal for white folks my entire life, right? I mean, that's just the reality. I grew up in Harlem. I went to high school on the Upper West Side, and I can tell you just the difference in how it was treated by enforcement. I had I get a lot of calls in the middle of the night from friends and family, legal assistance. I represented a friend who was arrested for smoking in his younger days one roach of a joint, and a police officer who arrested him told him, you need to do what I do, just smoke it at home. So the person who arrested him was also saying he was doing it. So we just got to stop this fiction. We got to have one standard of justice for all. And you're right, these cases are still being brought, even though we have statements of principle from certain DAs that they won't be prosecuted. So, we need to have a hard line on this as a prosecutor and say, look, we're not doing this kind of case. I mean, just as recently, 2 years ago, we've seen these, articles about, and I was just with a bunch of young Black men on 145th Street at Street Corner Resources earlier this week, talking about, what to do when you're stopped. And you remember the phenomenon of police officers asking people to empty their pockets, right? And they pulled out the marijuana, then arresting them. So the DA can just say, well, I'm just not doing that. We're not doing that case, and then if the people always say, hey, the DA needs the police officers. Of course, there's got to be a relationship. I've worked with law enforcement my entire career. But you know what? The police can't prosecute someone without the DA. So you say, well, I'm just not doing it. So that as DA, I'm not doing those cases. Like I said, it's been legal for white people for 50 years, and we need one standard of justice for all.
Absolutely. So do tell us. Looks like you have as they say, a crowded field there.
Yeah, I think we may have fewer candidates than the mayoral race.
Yeah,
but we do. And look, I joke about it, but I was a political science major in college, and I think this robust engagement that we're having on from the city council candidates to all the other races up to including the mayoral race, it's great for our city, right? With people who want to serve, people coming forward with different ideas. This is what we need, particularly in this time of need and crisis. From criminal justice to healthcare to the wage and economic issues. So yeah, the field's crowded. I think in many ways I stand out from the field. I'm the only candidate who's spent time working on true public safety cases, the kind of gun trafficking work I talked about earlier. But also didn't grow up in the Manhattan DA's office doing the kind of cases. We talk about the two seats on the subway for the homeless person. So I've got the kind of public safety work and the judgment of the kind of cases to bring. and those not to bring, those that have really harmed our community. And I also have the most experience as a civil rights litigator, right? There's no one else in the race who can say, they're currently suing the NYPD, for trying to get transparency in excessive force killing of Mr. Garner, and the track record in both, I think, makes it particularly for folks, as we had this conversation, who know and have lived with both issues, who get the sinking feeling when the police car is following them, and they know what that means, but also know that we've got some real issues to unpack in our communities about making us, safer. And that's a community conversation that we are having, but we need the DA to be a part of that and talk about what real, true community safety means. So I'm the only candidate who spent the last 20 plus years, really an entire lifetime at that intersection of both public safety and civil rights.
So going back, I want to hear from you when you got your interest sparked in wanting to become an attorney. Did you know going into college it was something you wanted to do, or when did you kind of get the spark to do it, and did you have any mentors along the way? Yeah.
So the seed was first planted on that first gunpoint stop. I never forget. I went home, and my mother grew up in the segregated South. God bless her. She's passed now, and she said, "Did you get the badge number?" I said, "Mom, look, I was looking at that gun." Right. But she said, well, look, we don't just stop here. I wanted to go under the bed. Right. I was done. She said, no, we act. And so, Reverend Butts, who was my pastor then and is now, and C. Virginia Fields, who was my council member, obviously later became borough president. We got with them. And this was before, Mayor Dinkins had formed the Civilian Claim Review Board. But there was a process. And we went and we said, look, we told our story. And so not legal mentors in the sense, but I tell Reverend Butts and C. Virginia Fields, like, y'all started me on the way, right? Like that was activism. And I didn't know, I wouldn't have said I wanted to be a lawyer, but when I got to college and my first kind of legal internship was at the Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem as a summer investigator. Just as they were opening up, I don't know if you'll remember this, before the Giuliani cuts, they had new computers. It was great. And I was there in that kind of first wave. So those early experiences, and then when I went to law school, I would say the person who really touched me, and he's suffering from Alzheimer's now, and that's what my mom passed up. But Professor Charles Ogletree, prominent, civil defense lawyer, great mentor and professor. I think he was the one that took those kind of seeds of activism and molded them into sort of the law. And I would be remiss, I have to say, my first job after law school, I clerked for a federal judge whose name was Robert Patterson Jr. And he was phenomenal. He was the one, I didn't really know either of my grandparents. I think he was 80 at the time I clerked for him. And I'll never forget, it was a history lesson. And he taught me the laws of a profession, how to practice. And so those early experiences, I've had a lot of mentors along the way, but those really formative ones, taking those early experiences here on the streets in Harlem and showing me like what we can do to change that, and bottling them up and trying to use those experiences to get change that we all need, for all of us.
Excellent. One of the things I certainly do know, that there are sometimes programs. I know that, let's say, for instance, I'll give you the police department has a program for young people called the Explorers. The DA, you're an important department agency within the city. Are there programs that can expose young people to the law, to what you do?
Definitely, and I've had, actually, one of my former Sunday school students did a program at the DA's office. And now she's applying to law school. It's great. She's waiting any day now. Nice. And so there are programs, and I want to expand them. I mean, I think this is a huge thing. People, I talk about when I hire people and I say, look, on my resume, if I were applying for a job right now, I'd have Sunday school teacher and Harlem Little League coach. That's a big part of who I am. And I want the same hiring. We need to be hiring people who are interested not just in cases, but in public health, public safety, and community engagement. And so it's going to be a real important feature We got an office on 125th Street, DA's office. It is underutilized. I respectfully submit. There's a Washington Heights office, which I think is dormant, perhaps empty. Maybe the better
I didn't even know it was there. Wow.
They had a ribbon cutting ceremony, and I don't know if anyone's been back since.
Wow.
And so we need to be present in our communities. And the one thing I would say is I want to be careful, because I think sometimes government is guilty of this, supplanting the community resources that are already there. So I think it's important for the DA to meet the community where it is. Like, we've got great faith groups doing great work on reentry. We've got great not-for-profits doing work in that space. We've got great youth enrichment programs that are already happening. So we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to say, the DA, you need to be here with the community, working side by side to address these issues that we're already doing. We bring the DA's resources and the focus of government to complement what is happening. And the research shows, when we get, youth exposed to these sort of issues, the outcomes are great. So it's a huge commitment, and I'm talking about Harlem because I'm from here, but obviously throughout the island, we've got, we have youth that are, need this kind of work, in particular up here, but also throughout the island. So really, it's going to be a particular emphasis of mine.
Excellent.
What are your thoughts about the Biden administration and kind of a new direction coming from Washington in terms of a lot of the issues that we're facing?
I'm excited about it. My college friend who I work with at the Attorney General's office, she headed up our Civil Rights Bureau. She's the nominee to head the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. She's phenomenal. I've known her since I think I was 19 and she was 18. I was president of the Black Student Association one year. She was the president of the year after me. And then we did great work together at the Attorney General's office. So I'm really excited about that. Vanita Gupta, who's the appointee to be the number 3 person, is phenomenal. The person who's in that role in an acting capacity, I had the good fortune of recruiting to the Attorney General's office. So he just went from the New York Attorney General's office down to DC. So I just think that you look at who the people they're bringing in. Right? Oh,
yeah. That's my classmates, Monty Wilkinson, now as acting Attorney General.
It's just such a departure from the incompetency, right? Like, putting people in charge of agencies that they had nothing to let's put this world-renowned doctor in charge of housing. What? Let's put someone in charge of education who don't know anything about schools. It doesn't make any sense. So to see the return of, let's go get one of the country's best civil rights lawyers to head the Civil Rights Division. It shouldn't be remarkable, but it is.
Right.
It just makes common sense. So I'm excited about the direction. Look, we obviously have to help folks accountable, and we'll keep on doing what we do, particularly as a Manhattan and as a state. But I look at the people first, which is where we are, and I'm really excited about it.
Excellent. NightWatchman, how we doing over there, buddy?
We got a few minutes left to wrap up, and then of course we're going to invite people to join us on Clubhouse. If you're listening to us live,
yes,
be on Clubhouse afterwards, and looks like we may be able to coerce Alvin to join us, and so that would be an opportunity. If you heard something interesting and you have a question directly, you can ask that question to him. So any kind of final things you want to share with us about your candidacy?
Well, first, I just want to thank y'all, because I think that these conversations are important to the health of our community. Getting together, talking about issues in an unfiltered way, and I look forward to getting questions from folks. So I want to thank y'all for your leadership. It is just so important to our community to have these discussions. And as for my candidacy, look, I'm excited. We're going into the home stretch here now. June 22nd, is the date. Register to vote. If you haven't, even if you say that Bragg guy is no good, I don't like what he said. Register anyway. Vote. We all got to be involved.
So Alvin, back up for 1 second. So June 22nd is what is the primary date?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's different for us, right? Because we're used to going in September, but it's June, which is different, and that's not just Manhattan DA, right? That's the mayoral primary. That's the controller, borough president, public advocate, city council. Now, for Manhattan district attorney, that'll probably be it because of the number of registered Republicans and Democrats in Manhattan. The general election, I don't think anyone thinks will be contested.
And you also reveal the fact to me in terms of the voting. I want to ask one question. So you revealed to me that typically the votes to elect the DA typically come from the Upper West Side and Harlem or Northern Manhattan.
That's right. So Upper West Side, Harlem, Washington Heights, Inwood account for more than 60% of the Manhattan vote. You think about it in terms of a Manhattan race. That's how you have Scott Stringer, Gail Brewer, C. Virginia Fields, who I mentioned, David Dinkins. Before that, Percy Sutton, the grandfather of my campaign manager, Keisha Sutton James. So that's those numbers are we should vote in all the elections, but particularly here, our impact uptown has historically been felt in the borough-wide races. Not so much for DA because we haven't had that many contested district attorney races, but the same electorate, obviously, for the borough presidency. So, look, I'm at alvinbragg.com. I appreciate folks looking at it. I hope people are interested in what I'm saying. I think it would be transformational for our communities in particular, but more broadly for the entire island to have a safer, more just, fairer process. So I'm excited about it, and this new frontier, y'all are cutting edge on Clubhouse. So let's jump to the new platform.
You got it.
So the one issue I want to bring up is that there seems to be some movement afoot to get Republicans to now switch their registration to Democrats so that they can have influence in the primaries. So I think we need to be mindful of the fact, especially in our communities, sometimes we feel we drop off when it comes to primary elections because people don't think of it as important. So I think we have to keep it first and foremost in people's minds that we cannot let our foot off the gas pedal when it comes to fighting for our voting rights. And I think that we proved that we can have an impact when we work together. We saw that in the November election where Black women literally saved democracy. So we're at the wrap-up point. Thank you so much, Alvin, for joining us. It's great to hear about your background about public service, and we wish you the best in your candidacy. It's a crowded race, but the race goes to the strongest and the swiftest, and we wish you well on that. So this has been Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, also streaming live on YouTube, and you can catch us on Clubhouse.
All right. Alvin, good seeing you, my brother.
Great seeing you.